Chinese President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Donald Trump exchanged phrases after their first face-to-face meeting in Florida. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. This is The Heat. The two-day summit between the Chinese and U.S. delegations is being described as positive and productive. Chinese President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Donald Trump, who met at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, say they had the chance to establish a relationship and discuss a wide range of issues, including trade, investment, and security. Mr. Trump also accepted an invitation from President Xi to visit Beijing later this year. We begin our coverage with CGTN's Nathan King in Palm Beach, Florida. Nathan, there was a lot of anticipation about this meeting, so what was accomplished?
Well, I mean, as we know, the fact the meeting happened at all is quite incredible. Remember, Chinese-U.S. relations were nowhere about 3 or 4 months ago with the China bashing during the 2016 election campaign. And then when U.S. President Trump was president-elect, he took a congratulatory call from the leader in Taiwan, questioned the one China policy. Relations really froze. So it took a lot of diplomatic maneuvering behind the scenes by a lot of the people who were actually here at Mar-a-Lago in the 24 hours we've just had to actually get to this stage. And the fact that it happened in the first 100 days of Donald Trump's presidency, before the administration have really formulated fully their China policy, was actually a win for China, because they could come here and explain their positions and hopefully influence thinking. In terms of actually what came out in the last 24 hours, I would say they've set the course for the next several years in a couple of ways. According to the U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and the Commerce Secretary Will Ross, they have established about a 100-day review of trade policy, looking at the trade deficit. They've also got a commitment, they say, from China to look at policy on the DPRK and its ballistic missile and nuclear testing. Also, they've rearranged the mechanisms whereby they talk about lots of different issues, everything from cyber to people-to-people exchanges, strategy, and the economy. And they've narrowed it down a little bit. And the Americans say, we think it's going to be a little bit more results-based rather than process-based. But generally, it was about the attitude of the two men. And, you know, they really seem to get on well. I contrasted it, you know, with what happened here at Mar-a-Lago with that meeting with the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, which seemed very frosty, and they were poles apart.
Nathan, President Trump had a very large delegation with him. Almost his entire cabinet were down there for those meetings. What should we read into that this big delegation went down with him?
Yeah, it was a big delegation. The Chinese had a sizable delegation as well. You know, for me, what was very interesting was the dinner last night, where everyone was sitting. Very close to the Chinese president was Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law. But very far away was Stephen Bannon, who had just been demoted off the National Security Council and, of course, had predicted war with China within a decade. So I think this is also the paying off of the diplomacy behind the scenes, and also the dynamics of the Donald Trump cabinet, where we see, if you like, the sort of economic nationalists perhaps on the wane in the first 100 days. And then we have people like Jared Kushner, the son-in-law, who behind the scenes helped a lot of this meeting happen, on the ascendancy. Also, Gary Cohn, the advisor, Wilbur Ross, Commerce Secretary, and the like. It doesn't mean necessarily that this is a big win for China. Policies are still policies, but at least they're people who aren't predicting all-out war, whether it be trade or military.
Okay, Nathan, thanks. I'll get back to you in a moment, but for now, let me introduce our panel for more on the China-U.S. summit. Let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Beijing is Shindo Xu. He's a political analyst for China Radio International. From New York, we're joined by Robert Hormats. He's the vice chairman of the international consulting firm Kissinger Associates. And here with us in the studio is Oriana Skylar Mastro. She's an assistant professor of security studies at Georgetown University and a Stanton Nuclear Fellow with the Council on Foreign Relations. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Oriana, let me start with you. So there were no great agreements or breakthroughs announced at the summit. The Chinese President Xi Jinping did make a statement at the summit. It was very diplomatic in tone. Let's take a listen to part of what he said.
We have been talking for a long time. Through our communication, we've reached a lot of agreements. More importantly, we got to know each other better and have built trust, friendship, and a working partnership between us. We will work towards promoting this friendly relationship, which will benefit China, the U.S., and their peoples. We will also do our part in promoting peace and stability globally.
So lots of diplomatic niceties there, nothing really big. Is that what you expected?
From Xi Jinping, absolutely. I think the Chinese side was primarily concerned about unpredictable and unexpected behavior on the part of President Trump. So the fact that the U.S. side didn't say or do anything that put Xi Jinping on the spot, in particular about bilateral issues, I think from that perspective, it was a win for China. China, I think, also learned through this summit that the most important thing is to give President Trump symbolic wins in return probably for real wins. And so if you take a look at the things that were stated, any idea of the power of Trump's personality to convince China to do things that they weren't going to do before, I think that's very naive. Xi Jinping came to this meeting with a very clear idea of what he wanted to accomplish, and I'm sure he'll go home feeling like he accomplished it.
Okay, let's go to Bob Holmatz in New York. Bob, if we look at what has happened over the last few months, just a few months ago, President Trump was accusing China of being a currency manipulator, of taking advantage of the United States. He used some pretty tough language. Now he's calling this relationship outstanding. He says tremendous progress was made. Would it be fair to say that even if nothing of substance was achieved at the meeting, that the American tone has certainly changed?
Absolutely. I think for a number of reasons. One, Trump probably, in the time he's been in office, has come to understand that the United States needs to have a good relationship with China to accomplish virtually anything internationally. Second, there are a lot of people around him, Gary Cohn, Wilbur Ross, and numerous others, who understand the importance of the U.S.-China relationship and understand that you're not going to get anywhere by trying to push China and take tough lines rhetorically against them. You've got to work with China and develop what the Chinese call win-win solutions. And third, there are a lot of very critical issues where we need China right away. China is very, very involved in fighting terrorism. They're certainly involved on the questions that relate to the Korean Peninsula and numerous other things. So for strategic reasons, we need to work with China. And also, China is a big market. So all the American business people who've met with Trump have underscored the fact that you need to work with China because China is the second biggest economy in the world and very important to a number of American companies. So you have to find some modus vivendi to work with them constructively on economic issues. All these played a role in the more moderate, constructive posture that Trump took.
Okay, let's bring in Shindu from Beijing. And Shindu, let's listen to what President Trump had to say about the meeting with President Xi.
I think we have made tremendous progress in our relationship with China. My representatives have been meeting one-on-one with their counterparts from China, and it's, I think, truly progress has been made. We'll be making a lot of additional progress. The relationship developed by President Xi and myself, I think, is outstanding. We look forward to being together many times in the future, and I believe lots of very potentially bad problems will be going away.
So, Shindu, we can hear the change in tone there from the U.S. leader. How has this summit, the visit by President Xi, being viewed in China?
Well, I think people in general view it very positively. This is a very important relationship between the two largest economies. At the same time, they are the largest trading partner of each other. And if you look at, yes, there's a lot of talk in the U.S. about the trade deficit on the U.S. side with China. But at the same time, if you take a look at the U.S. export to the Chinese market, there's a growth of export to China about 11% every year. Well, China's export to the U.S. is about 6.6% every year. And if you take a look at the U.S. beans, like 56% of the bean products are exported to China, and Boeing planes, 25% of them are in China. So there's a growing closeness between the two countries. I think President Trump is right, and obviously he's getting a better and better understanding about the importance of this bilateral relationship. And I think the summit has going on basically without drama. It's very smooth. It covers a wide range of topics, not only foreign affairs, military to military, people to people. They also agreed to activate the dialogue between the economic team, foreign affairs team, and the national security team. So you can see this is substantial progress. In addition to this personal relationship between the two presidents.
Nathan, when you look at the meeting over the past, 24 hours or so, did it live up to expectations? Did the Chinese get what they came for? And as Oriana points out, will they be pleased with what they got here? Was it essentially a set piece where nothing went wrong? We didn't even have a handshake malfunction.
Well, I don't think you can call it a set piece when Tomahawk missiles are being thrown at Syria during the most important meeting between the two biggest economies this year. But yeah, I mean, it was a pretty set piece, and the handshake, you're right, did go well. There's been all over the internet how President Xi actually dealt with Donald Trump's unorthodox handshake. And I think they got what they came for because the meeting happened, as I said, but also you could tell in President Trump's language during and after from his Secretary of State and others that they do realize that this is the most important relationship in the world now. The campaign rhetoric has gone, but the test is going to be down the line. They've kicked the can down the road on trade for 100 days, but let's see where those ideas go. It is considered that Stephen Bannon and perhaps Peter Navarro, the economic advisor in the White House, influences on the wane. We are going to get the ruling from Treasury on currency manipulation, although that's unlikely to go against China because they've actually been propping up their currency. So things do look okay. But on the strategic front, the DPRK, of course, is a big one. Now, there's a review, of course, going on in the White House about ending the strategic patience policy of the Obama administration. But the big question is, what new can the White House do? Now, there's been lots of talk about secondary sanctions, Iran-style financial sanctions on the DPRK. That could hit China quite hard, but, they may be in a position to help on that. It all depends on whether this policy is well thought out and leads to what perhaps China wants, which, of course, as you know, is demilitarization with talks leading to denuclearization, also clearing up this partition effectively on the peninsula and giving the DPRK security guarantees. So we're nowhere near that yet. But remember, this is about charting the course for the next few years. It's about relationship building. And in that, it seems like it was a success. No faux pas.
Okay, I want to get to that DPRK issue in more detail in just a moment. But first, let me go to Bob Hormats and get his view on the missile strike on Syria. Bob, this strike was, well, at least the meeting was overshadowed in no small way by the strike that happened while these two leaders were meeting. These were amid allegations, of course, that the Syrian leader, Bashar al-Assad, had used chemical weapons. The New York Times is reporting that the timing of the attack put President Xi in an awkward place. He either had to condone it or rebuke his host. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I saw the Times article. I don't think it's quite accurate. I think Xi Jinping, President Xi, who I've had a lot of contact with over the years, and when he was vice president and then subsequently president while I was in government, he's a very formidable leader. He had a very clear agenda, and the agenda was to develop closer ties personally to President Trump, to put behind them all the Trump rhetoric during the campaign, and to develop the kind of personal relationship which will last for at least the next 4 years and beyond. I think he did that quite successfully. The attack on Syria, on the Syrian base, did take a lot of, occupy a lot of public relations attention. It was on TV a great deal. But I think we need to look at the fundamentals of what happened at Mar-a-Lago over the last couple of days. And the fundamentals were that the two leaders got to know one another. They got to express their views, I think, quite clearly to one another. I think President Trump came to understand what a formidable leader, what a very substantial leader President Xi is. I think he came away with a lot of respect for President Xi, as do others who meet with him. So I think the public attention given to the attack on Syria did occupy a lot of TV time, but the more fundamental part of this was the relationship between the two leaders, the fact that each got a chance to express his views to the other, the fact that they came away, I think, with a better understanding of the need to work together in the future. Historically, I think that is going to be a fundamental element of this when historians write about it, the personal relationship and identifying an agenda for the future.
Right, Oriana, the one other theory that's been floating around here in Washington especially is that the timing of this attack was meant to send a message to China that this could happen to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea as well.
Well, I hope that's not a correct message. I'm hoping that President Trump understands the difference between shooting 59 Tomahawk missiles at an airfield, basically from a position in which U.S. forces are not vulnerable, is a very different situation than a conventional war and potentially a nuclear war on the Korean Peninsula. I know that Xi Jinping knows the difference, so the fact that President Trump was willing to launch this strike, I don't think it necessarily signals the strength and resolve that perhaps President Trump is hoping it signaled when it comes to the DPRK. I would say that the media focus on Syria is such a win for China. I think what's happening with Syria is a microcosm for exactly what Xi Jinping would hope for, which is we're not talking about the South China Sea. The South China Sea was not a focal point of this summit. And previously, under the Obama administration, the tensions between the United States and especially the militaries of China and the United States have been mounting in the South China Sea as China has been building up their islands and militarizing those islands. So the fact that during the summit, Xi Jinping could kind of ignore that issue and not have to deal with that issue with the United States, I think represents a win for them.
And neither was there much talk about the DPRK. Just a few days ago, Donald Trump was saying, if you don't act, referring to China, on this particular issue, we will act unilaterally.
Exactly. And even if there was some discussion, for example, about the economic sanctions or realm, basically the United States policy is it hopes that China will put more pressure, perhaps, to break their business entities' relationships with business entities in the DPRK. But those types of economic sanctions are not going to work in convincing Kim Jong-un to stop his nuclear weapons program and the development of an ICBM. China knows that, and that's why they've been reluctant to go along with this plan. So my biggest fear is they're going to make some concessions that look good, but basically are not going to help at all to deal with this nuclear issue. And in return, the United States might make some major concessions on key critical issues like the South China Sea.